Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Dementia Unplugged Care Conversations. I'm Jeannie Forrest, the host, and welcome you and some of you back again. Today, we'll be talking about LGBTQ considerations in dementia care. As always, I give a little bit of an introduction, and especially about our interviewee, and open it up to question and answer through the chat function after about 30 minutes of conversation. Before we get formally started, I want to read this important message from the Dementia Society of America. All content, including any potential medical information, is provided as an informational resource only, and it's not to be used for any diagnostic or treatment process. It should not be used as a substitute for professional diagnosis, care, and treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions and or for guidance about a specific medical condition. The opinions expressed and the content shared by me, Dr. Forrest, and my guests are not necessarily the opinions and content of the Dementia Society of America. Thank you for listening to that. For those of you who may be new to the program, I want to make sure that the word dementia is more formally understood. The word dementia is really an umbrella term, and it represents a whole variety of underlying diseases and conditions that present in a way what we call dementia. Similar to the word cancer, there are many different types of cancers. There are many different underlying subtypes along that umbrella term. So, the main takeaway here is that the word dementia is not a disease in and of itself, but there are many underlying conditions that present itself. Unfortunately, many are not curable at this point in our understanding in science. Some are reversible, and that's why it's so important to really receive an in-depth medical evaluation if you're concerned about yourself or someone else. The more known, familiar types of dementias are Alzheimer's disease, vascular, sort of a mix, Lewy body, frontal temporal, and the list does go on and on. And hopefully that kind of clarifies a little bit so that we're all sort of talking along the same manner. So you are listening today to Dementia Unplugged Care Conversations. Over the past year, it's been sort of subdivided into two other programs. So in our care conversations, we interview caregivers, leading researchers, innovators, doing lots of good work in dementia care. And it's the first Monday of every month. This year, we've also added Dementia Unplugged Musical Connections. These are sessions with really leading brain health scientists that look at the benefits of music in terms of brain health and just life enrichment. And this is on the third Monday of each month, and it's in partnership with Music and Memory. Thirdly, we have Dementia Unplugged Artful Insights. It is more of a conversation that looks at art from leading museums, and this is on the fourth Monday of each month, and it's in partnership with Arts Philadelphia. So we hope you will benefit from all of Dementia Society of America's programming. I'm going to introduce our guest today. That is Joe Fisher. He is the CEO of Renewal Memory Partners. A little bit of background here, especially for those of you who are listening in. Joe is a social entrepreneur, has a real passion for person-centered care, a lifelong advocate for marginalized populations. Joe's really has pioneered one of the first affirming care services for LGBTQ older adults and those with memory loss. In terms of background, Joe also holds a bachelor's degree in art history and an MBA from Columbia. He also has completed executive education through Harvard Divinity School, serves as an advisory council to the Zen Center for Contemplative Care. And in his spare time, when he's not in the office, he travels, enjoys histories, modern art, meditation, spending time with his husband, Al, and son, Ethan. So with no further ado, and also I should say that you can reach him later on through renewalmemory.org. So now I'm going to stop sharing these slides so I can welcome Joe.
Thank you so much, Janine, for having me today, and thank you as well for Kevin for hosting.
Welcome.
I'm really glad to be here.
Yes, and of course I am going to minimize, and there you are. Okay, now I can see you. Oh, the joys of technology! I just love it. So glad. I know we're thrilled to have you today.
Thank you.
And so I think I like to start off with tell us a little more of how you became interested in maybe specializing a little bit in dementia care, especially for LGBTQ individuals.
Sure. Well, I think for me, the first area of specialization was an interest in serving LGBTQ older adults. I've always been interested in serving the community. I've always had a bit of an activist strain in myself. During my college years, I interned at the Empire State Pride Agenda, which at the time was the nonprofit advocating for rights on a statewide level in New York. Fortunately, we've made a lot of progress since then, not just on a state level, but on a national level. But my mom, she's worked in home care for about 20 years. My dad is a nurse, so this is also in my DNA to a certain extent.
Exactly.
But in the year 2009, I had graduated, or the previous year I had graduated from my graduate program, and I was really interested in doing something focused in social enterprise to be of service. And one of the things that was increasingly on my own radar is just how am I going to age as a member of the LGBTQ community? What are the resources that are available to me? And one of the things that I discovered in living in the year 2009 in the city of New York was that there wasn't a resource available at that time for LGBTQ older adults who wanted to age in place at home. And this was very surprising to me, especially in a place like New York that continues to have such a thriving population within the gay community. And this was very concerning to me. It really, particularly because the more I learned that many people in the community were going back into the closet as they aged for fear of discrimination. Mm-hmm. And this was a generation that I felt especially indebted to because it was the generation that fought at Stonewall, that was marching when it was very hard to do so, and really paving the way for many of the rights that that the community enjoys today. So I've always felt a lot of gratitude and indebtedness to this generation. And so when I first started out with Renewal, it was to create the first home care service in the country that had a special mission to providing a safe space for LGBTQ older adults. My interest in dementia came rather organically from there, because many of our first clients that we served had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or a related dementia, which, as we know, can include many other types of dementia. And so my interest and expertise kind of grew client by client, and I discovered just an inner passion for serving people with dementia. I think particularly for me, because I also have a background in the arts and music, and I love integrating that into our work. And I'm also an avid meditator, and I feel like one of the things, most important things about being with someone with dementia is living in the moment. So I think this is an area where I can just combine a lot of my interests into a single area of work.
Yes, no, I mean, it is really wonderful how that whole package of your background and skill set, and you had to learn by doing, right? I mean, this is, and we're still learning. And I know this is going to be difficult to answer because we don't have accurate numbers, but what's your sense of how many older LGBTQ individuals have some form of dementia? Where would we find that information?
That's a really great question, because I think one of the things that we're first trying to measure is how many LGBTQ adults are there in our population.
Yes.
I think that for decades this has been a largely invisible population and continues to be so to a great extent. But I think that in terms of current estimates, I believe that there's currently estimated to be roughly 2.5 million LGBTQ older adults in the United States, and that number is expected to grow by multiples in the years ahead. Yes. And I don't know a source that estimates the number of people specifically with dementia, although there started to be some studies indicating that people within the community have a higher risk. So I think it would be safe to say that the prevalence within the community is likely to be higher than that of the general population. And there was a study that came out from, I believe, the University of California in San Francisco a couple of years ago that validated that.
Okay, thank you for that. And so for the listeners now and who will be listening later to the recordings, it is, I think, imperative that we all become more dementia sensitive and competent going forward. For those who may be very new to this whole subject, can you just spell out or just identify what LGBTQ stands for? Might want to start there just to make sure we're all, again, using the same nomenclature.
Sure. And so LGBTQ would be lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transgender. And Q is queer, and that was a letter that was added on. I think probably in the past 10 years more prevalently, and I think oftentimes now we will also use a plus sign afterwards, because I think the acronym continues to grow. Sometimes people will put LGBTQIA, and so there's some people are identifying as not queer but questioning, or intersex. So I think there's one of the ways to be kind of continuously all-encompassing is to just add that plus at the end, and which could also include allies, which hopefully includes everyone.
Yes, thank you. Yes, because that can be confusing given sort of the alphabet soup that people are presented with, and it could be a real learning curve for many. So thank you for that. So in terms of how would you describe some of the major challenges or differences in caring for someone who is LGBTQ plus versus not? What are some of the extra struggles that you see as an owner of a home care agency? What's different? What makes it more challenging?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, I think that there are just many additional areas of added vulnerability. And hopefully, as time goes on and as acceptance grows, many of these areas of vulnerability will decrease over time. So, but in terms of the current generation that's growing older within the community, they are less likely to have family support, which I think is huge for all of us who are aging. Many are estranged from their biological relatives. Many do not live with partners, or perhaps their partners have passed away, and live alone. And I think that social isolation is becoming more and more known as a silent killer. Unfortunately, there's been many studies emerging just showing higher rates of mortality among people who are socially isolated, and I think that because of that isolation, many people within the community are more likely to fall through the cracks. They're harder to reach. And then when you do reach them, it can also be more challenging at times to understand exactly where they're coming from, including whether or not they're a member of the community. Many people within the community are hesitant to disclose their background or their orientation because of fear of discrimination. In fact, many, according to studies, avoid seeking medical care for that reason. So I think that being sensitive to the community really manifests in many different ways. I mean, I think from the way that organizations need to train their staff, to hiring and ongoing care, but there's many best practices. But I think one of the baseline things that we all need to do is to not make assumptions. And
yes, that someone is straight, number one. Absolutely. That sort of seems to be the knee-jerk reaction in making that assumption. And I just want to emphasize some of the things you talked about, is that, especially for some of my own clients, it's often the diagnosis of dementia often is late because of the fear of entering into a healthcare system that can be very discriminatory and stigmatizing. And so it may be much later before any type of dementia-related diagnosis comes on board. And then the idea of family, using the term family of choice, not assuming that someone's blood-related brother or sisters are considered family. They may have ostracized someone. So you really are expanding that circle of care into their family of choice.
Right. That's a term that we often use a lot in our work because of the unfortunate estrangement from biological families. Also, LGBTQ older adults are much less likely to have their own children. So they've been put in a position where they needed to define their own families on their own terms. Mm-hmm. And I think that I think along those lines, many people within the community, I think statistically are more likely to care for others outside of their bloodlines in caring for their families of choice. I think that on that, I had a couple of thoughts on families of choice. I mean,
sure, please.
I mean, I think one of them would be, in terms of, I think there's really the importance of creating the space for people to define that family when you're interacting with people within the community. Mm-hmm. So I think that rather than asking who are you married to, or other things that create certain assumptions, I think it's sometimes useful to just ask who's important to you in your life. And it's a very open-ended way that lets people define things on their own terms. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to be aware of coded language. And this coded language often exists because of fears of discrimination and the perceived.
So can you articulate a little bit more about what you mean by coded language?
Sure. So if you're with a couple that, or maybe you're with two men who have been a couple for the past 50 years, and you meet them in their home, one might refer to the other as a friend. Mm-hmm. This is my friend. So language like that doesn't quite tell the full depth of their relationship. So sometimes there can be the need to read between the lines and really kind of meet people literally on their own terms.
No, that makes total sense. And because it takes a while for people to trust you, especially right. if you have staff that are coming into the home, not sure. And then what happens? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, or if this has ever happened, where you alluded to people going back into the closet? So as short-term memory starts to disappear in many of the dementias, and it's the longer-term memories that stay in place. And so in the past, people were not out. So all of a sudden, there's this strange back and forthness of, mm-hmm. Yes, I was out, but now in my own mind, I'm not going to talk about that again. Does that ever happen to you in your staff?
That's interesting. I mean, I think and I think, as you may have said on this show before, if you've met one person with dementia, then you've met one person with dementia. So I haven't, in my experience yet, worked with someone who went back into the closet kind of as they've time traveled with their dementia. Although that's certainly something that I could foresee happening with an individual.
Yeah, it is a strange way of being, and I kind of have experienced that. So tell us a little bit more on how you have prepared your renewal memory care partners to be more dementia sensitive and competent? What is it that you do to help meet those challenges?
Sure, sure. Well, I think one of the first things that we do, before anything, is we just try to create, create the signals that we are a safe space. And so we've done that on our website and in our literature for years, just very explicitly stating that we are here to be a safe space for LGBTQ older adults, and having it be more than just a little disclaimer at the bottom of our website. And I think in the hiring process, it's a question that we always ask. Are you comfortable, or how do you feel about working with people from the LGBTQ community? This is a population that we are very committed to serving. I think the answer to that question can be very telling. If somebody says, "I don't have a problem with that," that's a start, but that's really not the answer that we're looking for. We're really looking for individuals who feel passionate about serving this underserved population and are really eager to embrace their humanity rather than just tolerate it.
Yes. I like the way you said that. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that once people are on board with us, it is a focal point of our training. So we have worked with an organization called SAGE for many years since our inception, and I'm not sure if SAGE is how well known that may be.
Yeah, maybe you could tell a little bit more to those who are listening. What is SAGE and what did they teach you?
Sure. SAGE is a wonderful organization. It is also an acronym. So it stands for Services and Advocacy for GLBT Elders. And they are a nonprofit that works, they're national at this point. I think they were started in a more grassroots way, I believe, in the 70s. But they now have affiliates all throughout the country. And SAGE is wonderful. They have a variety of programs that are focused both on the national level, really advocating for policy changes in Washington, but also in the trenches, providing social services to people who need them, and training organizations throughout the country in cultural competency. So we've been getting trained by SAGE now for a decade, and we've also participated more recently in a program that they launched called SAGE Care. And SAGE Care is a program where it's a more formalized version of this training, and it's a certification program where organizations can train different levels of their staff in cultural competency, and we are at the platinum level, which means that 80% or more of our staff has been trained by SAGE. And it's a wonderful training. I highly recommend it to anyone who's in a position to introduce it to their organization. It's as a member of the community myself, I learned a lot from it, and I sometimes I think I even when I think I know it all, trainings like this are very humbling to me.
Totally agree. Yeah. So maybe can you articulate just a few of the topics? Because I'm getting a question in already, and that's great. I'll it's a little more broad, but I think people are looking for more nuts and bolts. What is the difference from the care? What is different from the care of the LGBTQ community compared to the care of the straight community? So that was a question that popped up. So maybe if you could give us a sense of the types of topics that you use.
Sure, sure. Well, I think that one of the things that I would say just in response to that question, and Janine, I'm sure you have your thoughts as well, but LGBTQ older adults suffer from the same aches and pains as every other human being. So, and the disease, Alzheimer's does not discriminate in the way that it progresses through somebody. So, I think that I think that's the fundamental approach for caring for all people with Alzheimer's is to take a person-centered approach, and a humanistic approach. And I think that the more training that we have in cultural competency, hopefully that's just setting the stage for us to put the best practices into place that we already know exist, which is to celebrate the person as they are and to celebrate their past.
Yes.
And their accomplishments, and to tap into their passions, and to be able to relate to them in a deep and meaningful way. So one of the things that the SAGE training covers is just what the history has been in the past 60, 70 years for people within the LGBTQ community. You're talking about how it's how there's been changes in laws, and there were laws on the books even into the 21st century against the community, discrimination in housing and employment, the raids that would take place on a regular basis in social settings. And even within the medical community, it was not homosexuality was considered a disorder, I believe, until 1973. So I think this training has really given us a window into what the lived experience has been for members of the community whom we are currently caring for, and just creating more of a kind of a pathway for empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, I agree. And just to kind of emphasize, in the end, I don't want to say that the disease or the underlying pathology doesn't matter. In the end, people progress very similarly, especially towards the end of life, and everyone is deserving of respect, and there may be more physical care that's required in the late and final stages of many of the dementias. And this is where people also need to be sensitive and competent. If we're talking with and caring for someone who's transgender, that may be confusing to people who may not be familiar with the LGBT part of the community. So I think having the skill set and the healthcare knowledge particularly makes it a little more unique. And so there are differences. Yes, we celebrate the person and their all of their preferences, but I think that there's extra training that more especially healthcare providers need to be aware of in the later stages. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's caring for people within the transgender community is something that is relatively newer, even to people who have had this commitment to the gay and lesbian community for a long time, as we have. So we're also still learning um, how we can provide better care to the transgender community, as I think many other dedicated providers are.
Yeah.
In terms of healthcare within the community and what we can do, I think as providers and people who support people with dementia, I mean, I think that another thing that can come up that I think is important to be mindful of is really on the administrative side, is because as one of the things that is really critical for all of us is to have advanced directives in place, and I think that's especially true for people within the community who, because there's been many horror stories of couples who have been together for decades, but they're not married. Mm-hmm. And when the one of them gets sick, the rights and privileges of their lifetime partner are not honored. Mm-hmm. And I think in some cases, decision-making capacity may go to a blood relative that is not as close to the person as their life partner would be. So I think one thing that we try to do with anyone that we work with in the community is to make sure that they have that documentation in place. If they have however they've defined their family of choice, to make sure that their healthcare proxies and powers of attorney are aligned with that.
Yes, it's important for everyone, as for sure, but especially in this community, because again, we cannot make any assumption, and we would hate to be at the end of their life with no one to speak for them on their behalf on what their wishes would be. So good point, Joe. All right. I'm going to be starting to ask people to add their questions either through Q&A and chat. We've started that. And while your questions are bubbling up, I just remembered, and I guess I'll toot my own horn here, in terms of resources. I was able to participate and write in this book called Welcoming LGBTQ Residents, A Practical Guide for Senior Living Staff. Tim Johnston, he is the Senior National Director for Projects for SAGE. And I wrote in there about memory loss and LGBTQ care. So if any of you who are working in care communities, this would be something that SAGE produced, but I had the good fortune of being able to contribute to it, and would encourage that. Joe, while we're waiting, is there any question? What points would you really like to emphasize here that I didn't, what questions didn't I ask so far that you want to make sure people leave who may be family care providers or people of the community themselves, or anyone listening? What do you want to make sure you hit home?
Well, that you're a really great interviewer, Janine. So I think you've covered so many of the essential points. But let me think about that for a second.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I think that really the point that would be most important, that would really inform everything else, is to really draw this distinction between tolerance and embracement of.
Love that. I love that. Yes. Tell us more. I have an idea, but tell us more.
Oh, well, sure. I just think that I think that for a long time, I think that the bar has just been set a lot lower in terms of what's considered acceptable. And I think for a long time, the bar was set at tolerance, which basically just meant that we're not going to be hostile to somebody who is a member of the LGBT community. We're not going to verbally accost them. Of course, we're not, there's not going to be any physical harm done to this individual. Mm-hmm. But I think that acceptance in the past has really been more geared towards just guaranteeing somebody's safety rather than truly honoring them as a human being. Mm-hmm. And I think that if not talking about somebody's life in terms of who they've loved, is, I think, a sin of omission. Yeah. I think that one of the most important things with dementia is having the space to reminisce and to celebrate memories. And, I think that everyone within the community should have the right and the ability to talk about when they first fell in love and what was that like and how did they meet their partner. Yeah. And what was it like for you when you were 21 years old. Mm-hmm. I think to not talk about those things, I think, is doing somebody a disservice.
I totally agree, Joe. A question popped up, and it's relevant and maybe a little to the side, but the question is from Edie: are there specific legal issues that we must know due to marital status within the LGBTQ community? Legal issues that we must know regarding the LGBT. Okay, so that's the question.
That's a great question, and I went to business school rather than law school, so I don't have a great answer for you, but I could point you to the Lambda Legal Defense Fund. I believe that they are an organization that kind of specializes in legal issues within the community, and I believe that marriage equality on the federal level has resolved many of those issues, but I think that nevertheless, at the end of the day, we do need people on the front lines to be competent and honoring these relationships. And I think that's where things can still fall short, unfortunately, even though the legal protections are in place.
Right. They could be in place, but it's the attitude and the being non-judgmental and the inclusivity that takes longer. You can put the laws on the books, but it takes, as we know, time for people to change the way they think.
Right. When you're being triaged at the hospital, how is that experience unfolding?
Absolutely. Okay. Also, elder care attorneys can help as well. So that's another piece. If there's a concern about LGBTQ in marriage, you look for those who specialize in elder care who also have a background in LGBTQ plus issues. Well, this, we can go on, and it has been an absolute joy and privilege to hear from you and to thank you as a member of the LGBTQ community for your work in this. I also want to make sure that people know that you hire, you make a concerted effort, an intentional effort to help, to hire people from the same community.
We do. It's not something that we can. It's not something that we can ask people, from a compliance standpoint when they interview with us. But many people do come to us and self-disclose that they are a member of the community and that they are interested in working with us because of our mission to serve the LGBTQ community. And I think that by recruiting members from the community, we've been able to serve as a conduit for the community to care for itself, which has been a really beautiful opportunity for us.
Oh, absolutely. No, it absolutely has. And I think individuals are that much better to feel cared for from people who kind of know the situation. So on that note, what I'm going to do is share my screen. And again, thank you, Joe. Thank you. And if others need to have other questions with Joe, you can reach him through Renewal Memory Care. And we'll see how. I'm going to just want to make sure that people know let's see if I can share this. Yes.
I can put my email address in the chat if that's.
That would be great. Okay. That would be great. So I want to put up on the screen. Oh, I did have on the screen. Where the heck? Let's see. Today is one of those technology days. Current slide. The Dementia Society of America. We couldn't do this without the support of DSA. And I would highly encourage all of you who are listening in and watching to take a look at all that is available through DSA. And it continues to grow. And if you're able, would encourage you to donate. This is an all-volunteer program, and it allows for additional education and training to many care providers and family caregivers, and also provides seed money for research within the area. So thank you for that. And now I'll stop sharing one more time. Just to say to everyone who's listening, thank you again. Feel free to listen to the recorded version that will be available. It takes a little bit for Kevin to put that together, but it will be available on YouTube. And Joe has put his email and number on the chat function for those of you who are interested. So on that note, we wish everyone well and come join us again next month. Take good care.